The village of Oluwani rested at the edge of a gentle river, where mornings began with birdsong and evenings melted into the rhythm of drums and laughter. The sun there seemed kinder than elsewhere, its warmth falling like golden blessings upon the red earth and thatched huts. In this tranquil place lived a young woman named Amara, whose presence seemed carved from the essence of light itself. Amara was the kind of beauty that silenced conversations. Her skin shimmered like smooth bronze when the sun kissed it, and her thick black braids flowed down her back like streams of midnight. Her eyes, large, calm, and full of quiet fire, carried the kind of depth that made even the proudest man forget his words. But it wasn't her face alone that drew people to her. It was the calm grace in her voice, the humility in her movements, and the rare kindness that softened her every action. Each morning, long before the marketplace stirred to life, Amara sat by her loom beneath the wide shade of a mango tree. There, she wove colors into stories, threads of crimson, blue, and gold coming together under her skilled hands. The villagers often said that her wrappers carried the soul of the land. Chiefs, brides, and dancers wore her work proudly. To own a wrapper from Amara was to carry a piece of beauty itself. But the admiration of the village went beyond her craft. Amara was known for her virtue, a woman who had chosen purity not from pride but from faith. She was called the Maiden of Oluwani, a title whispered with both reverence and longing. Men came from far and near to court her, drawn by tales of her loveliness and her virtue. They brought gifts in abundance, baskets of yams, strings of coral beads, and the finest goats their fathers owned. Yet Amara refused them all. Her heart sought something deeper than wealth or flattery. She longed for a man who would love her for her spirit and her mind, not for her beauty or her innocence. She believed love was not to be bargained for but discovered, like a melody that only two hearts could hear. Her parents, however, grew restless with each passing year. Her father, Baba Nana, was a man of few words, but his sighs grew heavier with time. One evening, as smoke rose from the cooking fire and the scent of roasted maize filled their compound, he spoke softly but firmly. "Amara, my daughter," he began, "the sun does not rise in the same place twice. You are our pride, but you are not getting younger. We long to see your bride price paid, your laughter filling another compound. Your mother and I wish to hold your children before our bones grow too old." Amara looked at him with gentle eyes. "Papa," she said, "the gods know my heart. I do not wish to shame you or Mama. But I cannot marry a man who does not see me. I want to be loved for who I am, not for what I can give." Her mother, Mama Ifeoma, wiped her hands on her wrapper and sighed. "My child, love is a seed. It grows after marriage. Do not wait for perfection. A good name is worth more than waiting for a dream." Amara smiled faintly. "Then I shall wait for a man whose heart beats with truth, Mama. Even if it takes forever." Her words filled the compound with silence. Outside, crickets began their evening songs. Baba Nana turned away, his face hidden by the firelight, his worry thick in the air. He had seen too many young women wait too long and grow old under the shadow of regret. Still, Amara's resolve did not waver. She continued to weave each day, her loom echoing softly through the mornings. The rhythm of her work became her prayer, thread after thread, hope after hope. Her wrappers sold faster than she could make them, and travelers passing through Oluwani carried her art to faraway lands. Yet as the market women praised her, and the young men admired her from afar, Amara felt an emptiness she could not name. Beneath her calm smile was a quiet ache, a longing for something unknown. A connection not born from desire, but from destiny. And destiny, though silent, was already stirring. Beyond the river, in another part of the village, a man watched the sunset from his workshop. A man whose path would soon cross hers, forever changing the rhythm of her life. His name was Obinna, the carpenter's son, and his footsteps were already echoing on the thread the gods had begun to weave. Amara lifted her eyes to the horizon, where the sun bled into the orange sky. She did not know it yet, but the fabric of her fate had already begun to unravel, and with it, a story that would test the limits of purity, love, and sacrifice beneath the unblinking eyes of heaven. The day Obinna finally approached Amara's compound, the evening sun lay low and patient on the horizon, turning the dust road into a ribbon of amber. He arrived not empty-handed, but with the confidence of a man whose name carried weight. His father, the village chief, had raised him with firm hands and sharper expectations, and Obinna wore those expectations like a cloak, well-tailored, gleaming, yet heavy when night fell and no one was watching. He was a skilled carpenter, famed in Oluwani for fashioning stools that seemed to float on air and cabinets that swallowed secrets. The king's steward had praised his furniture. The elders nodded when his name was spoken, and the market women often claimed that even the sun paused to warm his workshop longer than any other. He came to Amara's father, Baba Nana, bearing two slender stools carved from Iraka wood, their legs a dance of curves and steady lines. "For your threshold," Obinna said, placing them down with reverent care, "so your feet may find rest before your heart does." The compliment was a small masterpiece, and Baba Nana's lips twitched despite himself. In the doorway, Mama Ifeoma watched with a linen head tie and careful eyes. She saw a man who could make wood obey, yes, but she also saw the steel of pride shining through his charm. Pride could build palaces. It could also set them ablaze. Obinna asked to speak with Amara under the mango tree where the loom sang its morning songs. She came, not flustered, not coy, but as she always did, grounded as a clay pot cooling after the kiln's breath. For a moment, Obinna forgot the words he had polished. This is what the griots meant, he thought, staring at the halo of sunlight around her braids. Beauty that softens stone. When he did speak, his voice was velvet. He praised her craft with lines that would have charmed a stubborn goat into a dance. "Your wrappers," he said, lifting one, deep blue flecked with gold, as if it were a sacred text, hold the hush of dawn and the shout of festival. "Marry me, Amara, and let us stitch our names into the same cloth." The request was bold. The village liked bold men. Amara did not blush. She listened, the way a river listens to stones, letting each word ripple over her. She had refused many before, but Obinna's approach was not merely the rattle of expensive gifts. He spoke as one accustomed to receiving yes, yet shrewd enough to earn it. Out of respect for Baba Nana, whose eyes held a plea he did not voice, Amara agreed to learn the shape of Obinna's spirit before giving him her answer. In the weeks that followed, Obinna walked with Amara to the market, carrying her bundles with a practiced ease. He made the little children laugh by balancing a calabash on his head and pretending to be a dancing tortoise. He praised Mama Ifeoma's pepper soup as if it could cure war. The elders nodded approval. "You see," they whispered at evening fires, "love grows when two people water it. Yet the same water that nurtures a garden can drown it." When the sun slipped behind the baobab and dew sweetened the grass, Obinna's compliments turned to persuasion. And the persuasion, each time, turned to pressure. "We are nearly husband and wife," he would say in the hush of twilight, the air scented with wood shavings from his day's work. "What harm in beginning our joy early? The moon sees no signature, only the heart signs first." Amara's voice, steady as a weaver's beat, held its line. "Honor is the mat we spread beneath our bodies," she answered. "If we soil it now, where will we sit tomorrow?" Obinna laughed lightly, hiding irritation in charm. But the laughter thinned with each refusal. He wooed her parents with offerings. He showered the compound with generosity that made neighbors murmur. At the village square, women began to rehearse wedding songs. The promise of celebration hummed like distant drums. One evening, under the honeyed sky, Amara studied Obinna's face. Handsome, yes, but tightened by a hunger that did not know patience. She had resisted every soft onslaught, but love, she told herself, was also trust. Perhaps, if she laid one brick of trust, a house of faith would rise. With a heart trembling like a gourd in wind, she said yes to an evening walk beyond the market road, where the world turned quiet. There, Obinna pressed again, words sugared, touch insistent. She yielded, not to desire, but to the hope that yielding might prove her affection, that perhaps goodness could be taught to pride. Yet when the moment came, pain rose like a wall. Her body would not open. She asked him to stop. He tried again pain bloomed, raw as a fresh-cut yam. Shame gathered like storm cloud on her skin. "Please," she whispered, "no more." Obinna, who could persuade stubborn wood to curve under his hand, found himself powerless against a gate he could not carve. They tried on another night, the same ache, the same refusal of flesh. And another, the same. The patience in Obinna's eyes drained away until only insult lived there, sharp and bright. "So this," he said at last, voice like a chisel's edge, "is the prize the village guards? A sealed gourd no one may drink from." Amara wrapped her wrapper tighter, as if cloth could be armor. "I am not a prize," she said softly. But softness splintered under his wounded pride. He left her in silence, went to the chief's hut with a mouthful of bitterness, and the next morning Oluwani woke to the malice of rumor. That Amara was a woman in face only, that the road between her hips was a lie. By market hour, the rumor had grown legs. By sunset, it had grown wings. When Obinna returned with the engagement bracelet, he did not return it gently. "I sought first water," he sneered, "and found a dry riverbed. I will not die of thirst." He walked away to applause from men who feared everything they did not understand. The bracelet fell to the earth and lay there like a broken promise, catching the last light of day. Gossip in Oluwani did not travel, it galloped. By cockcrow, 3 facts had twisted into a 7-headed story. The market women, who could split cola and truth with equal efficiency, measured Amara with sideways glances. "Such a face," they whispered. "But what use is a pot that cannot carry water?" Some men laughed into their palm wine. Others nodded gravely, as if they themselves had petitioned the gods and been denied. The cruelest said Amara was fashioned wrong, a calabash with no mouth. The gentler ones simply shook their heads and pitted a beauty that could not satisfy the hunger they recognized as the world's first law. Amara walked through this new weather with her chin steady and her breath thin. Every step sent pebbles of shame skittering across the floor of her chest. Children, who understood everything quickly and nothing fully, pointed as she passed. A girl in yellow tugged her mother's hand and asked a question with far too many syllables for her age. The mother slapped the girl's fingers down and said, "Hush," but her eyes stayed on Amara, not unkind, not kind, only burning with that slow fire of curiosity from which pity is cooked. At home, Baba Nana sat long and silent by the doorway, turning Obinna's engagement bracelet over and over in his hands, as though it might become wisdom if he wore it down enough. "My daughter," he said, voice thick, "the world's tongue has many barbs. Do not catch them all." Mama Ifeoma drew Amara to her lap the way she had when goat shadows on walls once frightened her child. "You are not broken," she murmured, rocking. "You are a mystery the world is too impatient to learn." But patience was in short supply in Oluwani. Amara, who had never traded sweetness for spectacle, found herself calculating routes through the village that contained fewer eyes. She kept to shadows, visited the riverbank at odd hours, and returned to her loom as to a sanctuary. There, the world remembered to be quiet. Her fingers, steady and blessed, carried colors across warp and weft. She wove one cloth with night sky blue and a path of glimmering white, threads that looked like a promise lighting a dark road. Another cloth was the color of split hibiscus and sunrise. In its center, she stitched a small symbol only she understood. A narrow door with a gold thread tied to the handle, loose and waiting. Yet work could not anesthetize every ache. Some evenings, a humiliation would surge without warning, a remembered sneer, a snatch of laughter from the square, and she would step away from the loom, palms to her eyes, breathing like a runner. When tears came, they came privately. Pride is not arrogance. In her it was the discipline of refusing to make her pain a public spectacle. In time, the family sought counsel from Mama Chica, the village midwife whose hands had caught more births than the chief had uttered proverbs. She examined Amara with care and silence. The air seemed to hold its lungs until she finished. "Listen," Mama Chica said at last, voice a worn drum, soft, deep, unwavering. "This is rare, but it is not a curse. The opening is too small, a path that never learned to widen. It makes coupling difficult and childbirth dangerous. Herbs may soothe, oils may soften, but there is no quick road here." Baba Nana's shoulders folded in on themselves. Mama Ifeoma's eyes went glassy with a grief that did not permit wailing. Amara nodded, turning the midwife's words over like stones, weighing them, testing their edges. "And if love is more than bodies?" she asked quietly. Mama Chica lifted her chin. "Then love must grow clever," she said. "The river that cannot rush must learn to bend." They tried remedies all the same. Infusions of warming leaves, sitz baths steeped in roots that smelled of the forest's belly, quiet chants meant to persuade the body to open like a flower. Days turned into weeks, and hope was put out in the sun each morning like cassava to dry. Each evening it was brought back in with less moisture than before. Through it all, Amara wove. The loom's beat was the drum that kept her from spilling into silence. But beyond the house, the chorus did not soften. In the square, Obinna, wounded pride disguised as dignified truth, allowed the story to stand as he had sculpted it. Men clasped his shoulder. Young boys, eager to inherit careless boldness, repeated his words as though they were wisdom. The chief, for all his gravitas, never publicly rebuked his son. That was how power worked. It hid behind doors carved from the very wood it had cut. One night, under a moon that looked like a scar healing, Amara stood in the compound and listened to crickets sawing the dark. "I will not be the lesson they teach their daughters," she whispered. "I will be the story they do not understand, but remember." The vow did not erase the hurt, but it stitched a stubborn dignity around it, a border pattern strong enough to frame what came next. And what came next would be a meeting on a market morning, when the sun poured honey on the roads and a stranger's voice turned cloth into song. The marketplace of Oluwani was not merely a place to buy and sell. It was the village's breathing chest. By mid-morning it swelled with spice smoke and bargaining laughter, with the bright cackle of women and the baritone of men arguing over the price of goats as if debating the fate of kingdoms. It was here that the village's memory arranged itself every day on mats and tables. Cassava, hot peppers, dried fish gossip. Under the great baobab, where the roots rose like the knees of giants, Amara set out her wrappers with the solemnity of a priest laying out sacred vestments. Each cloth shimmered as though it had been dipped in festival. She arranged them not by color alone but by feeling. The deep blue night sky cloth beside a sun-gold wrapper for balance. A bold crimson with black chevrons flanked by a gentle leaf green patterned with river waves. Women came and lifted the corners, clucked their tongues in admiration, then set them down with regret when their coins did not match their longing. Amara smiled without judgment and folded each cloth as if tucking a child to sleep. Yet admiration now came braided with mockery. A group of young men lingered across from her stall, laughter stitched into their posture. "Fine wrappers," one said loudly, "but the seamstress herself, she is a locked chest." Another whistled under his breath, as if to summon the shame to heel like a dog. A third offered, with faux concern, to buy a wrapper for his future wife who would give him 8 sons naturally, God willing. The words were knives wrapped in palm leaves. They cut even as they pretended to bless. Amara kept her eyes on her folding. A queen does not answer every drunkard in her tavern. Still, one cannot always be granite. After the men drifted away, laughter trailing behind them like smoke, Amara felt a tremor in her hands. She set the cloth down and breathed. Mom and Kem, an old trader of groundnuts, shuffled over and touched Amara's elbow. "Child," she said, voice a soft broom sweeping sorrow from a doorstep. "Stones thrown at the moon fall back to the earth. Keep your light." Amara nodded gratefully, and the gratitude was real, but the ache did not loosen. Shame has a way of anchoring itself in the body's quiet places. When the day's heat sank its teeth into the market, Mama Chica passed by Amara's stall carrying a basket of herbs. She paused, looked the young woman in the eye, and squeezed her hand. No words. Sometimes medicine is a touch. Sometimes touch is the only medicine that can hold until another comes. Amara felt steadier. She lifted a wrapper and traced the white path she had woven through the night blue. A path is a promise. At home that evening, Baba Nana sat on the threshold, greasing the dry hinges of the compound gate as if he could oil away fate's stiffness. "The world will forget this," he said without looking up. "It always forgets what it screams about." Mama Ifeoma shook her head over the cooking pot. "It remembers, just more quietly," she murmured. "Like embers after flame." She looked at her daughter then, face lit by fire, and said, "What you are is not a wound. It is a doorway to a different kind of life. Walk it with your head high." So Amara returned to her loom. She worked late into nights that smelled of charcoal and lemons. The rhythm steadied her, pull, pass, beat, the constant metronome of creation. In those hours, she was not rumor, not pity, not the subject of men's anxious boasting. She was a maker. She was the woman through whom color and pattern became memory you could wrap around your waist. But dawn always comes, and with it the village's appetite for spectacle. One morning, as the roosters argued with the sun, Amara heard a knock at the gate. When she opened it, she found two girls from the chief's compound holding a calabash of cola nuts and a message cut from Obina's newfound righteousness. "He wishes you health," they said, eyes shining with the satisfaction of couriers. "He asks that you return the engagement bracelet. Ah, he says you threw it to the ground in confusion, and he does not want gossip." Amara's first instinct was laughter. The second, a scorching offense. She fetched the bracelet from where Mama Ifioma had hidden it and placed it in the calabash with a steadiness that cost her something. "Tell him," she said, "that I return what does not belong to me, and that peace belongs to those who do not lie to themselves." The girls blinked, unsure where the insult lay, and scurried away. That evening, Amara took her wrappers to the river to rinse the dust from their edges. The water hummed around her calves. Overhead, birds stitched dusk with small black V's. She thought of leaving Oluwani, carrying her loom to a village where her name would not precede her. But you cannot outrun a story, you can only outlive it. She lifted a cloth and watched the river braid itself through the threads. "I will not be reduced," she said aloud. "If my body is a closed door, then my spirit is a house with 1,000 windows." The river did not answer. Rivers rarely do. But it carried a small echo of her vow downstream, and somewhere beyond the bend, a trader new to Oluwani would hear laughter that did not match the stories he'd been told. He would follow that sound until it brought him to a stall under the baobab, where color held court and a quiet woman wore the kind of dignity that silences liars. He came near noon, when the air glittered with heat and pepper smoke made a fine haze that turned everything into a painting. Ekenna arrived at the market with a bundle on his back and the alert, amused gaze of a man who had bartered in many towns and learned that every village believed itself to be the navel of the world. He was not tall, not especially broad, but he moved like water that knew how to find a path around stone. His laugh, when it came, was quick and honest, the sort that repaired a tired day simply by appearing. He had heard of the weaver before he saw her. Traders talk. In a town beyond the hills, a woman wearing a wrapper the color of yam leaves had swayed her hips and said, "This was woven by a maiden in Oluwani. They say even silence hums when her loom sings." Ekenna had smiled then, thinking it a pretty line designed to sweeten a price, but curiosity made a soft hook in him. Now, walking beneath the baobab's shade, he saw the stall of color and the woman who commanded it simply by being herself. Amara looked up as Ekenna's shadow folded over the cloths. She found not the hungry gaze she had learned to meet with caution, but an attentive one that paused before deciding what it wanted. He greeted her in the easy cadence of a man raised on many roads. "Sister, good day. I have been told your wrappers can persuade even the shyest waist to dance." The compliment was playful, not predatory. Something unclenched in her chest. He touched the edge of a sun-gold wrapper threaded with small black triangles like bird tracks. "This one," he murmured, "carries afternoon on its back." He lifted a night blue cloth and let it spill over his arms. "And this?" Someone stitched a river into a sky and called it fabric. Amara could not help herself, she smiled. "You speak as if cloth were a person." Ekenna shrugged lightly. "Everything is a person if you've traveled long enough. Even a road will tell you its mood if your feet learn to listen." They talked. First of price and thread counts and dye that didn't bleed even when the heavens did. Then of markets far and near, of a town where goats had learned to unlock gates with their horns, of a woman who sold groundnuts and prophecies side by side, of a drummer who could make even the reluctant praise dancer surrender her dignity to rhythm. Ekenna's words gathered the world and placed it before her like calabashes filled with something fragrant. He never asked about the village's favorite story. He did not let his gaze flicker toward the mocking men across the square. He purchased 3 wrappers at a fair price and promised to return if his customers did not riot with gratitude. He did return, not a week later but 2 days after, then 2 days after that, until Ekenna is back became a small chant the stall owners used to announce mid-morning. He brought news. Your blue sold before the Accra could cool. And laughter. A woman tried to claim it fell apart in the rain, so I would give her another, but the lie drowned on her tongue because the cloth looked better wet. He carried her bundles when his path and hers matched, and he never carried them as if it were a favor that required repayment. The market watched, as markets do. Some nodded approval, some frowned at what they could not categorize. A few men attempted to warn Ekenna with elbow nudges and smirks, but he treated their rumors like flies, acknowledged briefly, brushed away, forgotten. "I trade in textiles," he told one wag who pressed too boldly. "Not in people's private temples." The phrase flew around the square and perched in the ears of those who needed to hear it. Amara felt herself unspool in his presence, not toward recklessness but toward peace. They shared roasted plantains in lull hours, spoke of moonlight and harvest, of fathers who loved clumsily and mothers who loved fiercely, of the fear that arrives at the edge of joy and asks to speak with the manager. Ekenna did not push past her carefully guarded borders. He did not test gates to hear if they would rattle. He asked her one evening, as they packed up, "What color do you reach for when your heart is heavy?" She thought then answered, "Indigo. It makes the sadness honest, and honesty is kinder than pretending." He grinned. "Then I will buy indigo more often, so the world will pay you to be honest." And so a friendship wove itself, thread over thread, laugh over silence, respect over rumor, until one afternoon his eyes lingered an extra moment and his tongue grew shy around a sentence. Markets teach you to spend words with skill. Love teaches you to stutter. He cleared his throat, looked at his hands, then at her. Amara, he said, voice softer than the heat warranted. I find my thoughts walking toward you even when the road goes elsewhere. If I have overstepped, forgive me. But if I have not, would you permit my heart a small stall beside yours? The world paused. Even the pepper smoke seemed to hold its breath. Amara's heart rose like a bird that had forgotten it could fly. But fear is a hunter that remembers its routes. She felt the cold of old laughter slide across her shoulders. She wrapped her yes in silence and placed it under her tongue to warm there, saying instead, You are kind, Ekenna. Her eyes wavered, as river water does when fish turn beneath it. Then she did what people do when past pain knocks on a door that hope is trying to open. She smiled, thanked him for his help, and the next day began finding ways to stand where his shadow could not fall. Avoidance is a craft, and Amara practiced it with the discipline she gave her loom. She learned the hours Ekenna arrived, then shifted hers like a moon that preferred shyer tides. She chose stalls with different sightlines. She feigned the urgent business of thread counting when his step sounded near. When he found her regardless, because fate delights in cutting short the journeys of the fearful, she became a mist of politeness he could not grasp. Ekenna noticed. You cannot trade in fine fabrics and fail to see when a pattern changes. He gave her space at first. The world had taught him that rushing a skittish moment only drove it into the bush. But when the third week brought a silence that tasted of sorrow more than of shyness, he carried his worry to her stall like an offering. If I have offended you, he said quietly, hands visible, tone careful, tell me, and I will ask the river to polish me smooth. He tried to smile. It has done so before. Amara looked at his open face and felt the ache of kindness press against her ribs. The village had taught her to expect love to demand proof, then punish her for failing to supply it. Ekenna, standing there with the sun making bright coins on his eyelashes, demanded nothing. Which is why I must tell him everything, she thought, and immediately the old fear reared, hissing. She asked for time. Meet me by the river 3 evenings from today, she whispered. He nodded, as if she had handed him a schedule for a small miracle. That evening by the Oluwani River, the sky learned the language of orange, and the breeze smelled of rain that was still deciding. Ekenna arrived first and waited in a patience that did not check the horizon every heartbeat. Amara came with a wrapper around her shoulders, one dyed the color of comfort. She did not know how to begin. Some truths are a heavy calabash. One must find the right grip or risk dropping them on one's own toes. I have a story, she said at last, eyes on the river, and parts of it were written without my permission. She told him, halting at first, then with the clarity that arrives once shame tires of carrying its own weight. She told him about Obina's charm and his impatience, about her body's refusal and the village's swift trial. She spoke of Mama Chica's hands and verdict, of herbs that softened everything but fate, of laughter that still lodged like fishbones in her throat on some mornings. And she told him of her fear, not of being unloved, but of being loved for the wrong hunger, of becoming once more the performance ground for a man's wounded pride. Ekenna did not interrupt. Men like him, who have bargained with stubborn merchants and trickster winds, learn to wait until the whole story arrives. When she finished, silence lay between them like a mat carefully woven for a ceremony neither dared begin. He stepped closer only when she didn't step back. Amara, he said, voice like palm wine poured carefully so it does not foam over. I thank you for trusting me with this temple. I know how the world mocks what it does not understand. I will not join the chorus. He took her hands. You are not a locked door. You are a sacred library. Not everyone should enter. And not everything valuable can be entered. Many things are meant to be beheld, listened to, learned from, honored. If the path we walk together must learn another kind of step, then let me be the student joyfully. He smiled, a little crooked now, not from uncertainty, but from the tenderness that makes even strong faces soft. I do not love you for what your body might permit. I love you because when you speak, the world remembers how to be gentle. The river said yes in a small lap against stone. Amara, who had braced herself to be pitted, found instead an architecture of acceptance rising around her. Columns strong enough to bear the days when memory would try to throw stones. She did not rush into his arms. She let relief unfold at the pace of a dawn that knows it has all day. Then we will walk, she said. Slowly. And we will build where there is kindness. Kindness is not a carnival. It does not announce itself with brass. It went about its work quietly. Ekenna adjusted his days to hers without turning the adjustment into a favor. He learned her silences, when they meant rest, when they meant worry, when they meant ask me twice. Amara learned his jokes, how a poorly carved proverb could make him laugh until he cried, how he could turn a stubborn buyer into a friend by praising their stubbornness. And the market learned a new tone to its gossip. Less poison, more puzzlement, then slowly, a small respect that could not name itself yet. One night, as thunder stitched far hills with silver thread, Ekenna said, I will ask your father for permission to court you openly. The word openly beat in Amara's chest like a drum teaching a new dance. The next morning he came to the compound with Kola and Jin, and that unshowy humility people from many roads bring to a door they hope will open. Baba Nana listened, Mama Ifioma watched, heart a cautious bird. When Ekenna finished, the old man nodded. A man who brings humility with gifts buys cheaper from the gods, he said. Come again in a month. In the meantime, let the village see you walk with dignity. They did. And dignity, it turned out, was a more potent charm than pride. Soon the same tongues that had sliced Amara into rumor began to speak of the traitor, who treated her like a queen whose crown was invisible but undeniable. The story shifted. Stories often do when confronted with a truth that won't bow. And somewhere beyond the horizon, a path made of trials and moonlight began to wake, whispering the name of a forest that tests love until it forgets its own fear. The night wind carried the scent of rain, soft and uncertain, as Ekenna walked beside Amara under a sky of trembling stars. Between them, silence was not absence, it was language. The kind that spoke in the rustle of leaves and the soft brushing of two shadows that had learned to walk together without touching. Ekenna's confession at the riverside had changed something intangible. It had not broken the wall around Amara's heart, but it had made a door within it. Each morning now, she found herself looking for him at the marketplace before she even noticed her hands had stopped weaving. His laughter, deep and round, rolled through the air like drumbeats calling the soul home. Ekenna was different from the men of Oluwani. He did not seek to conquer. He built trust slowly, like a craftsman smoothing wood grain by grain. And Amara, who had spent years weaving color into silence, began to weave him into her heart without realizing it. The villagers, ever alert to new songs in the air, noticed. Women at the well whispered over their calabashes. "Do you see the way the trader looks at her?" one asked. Another replied. "And she no longer hides her face when he comes." A third woman added. "Maybe love has found a way to enter where the body could not." Their laughter rippled across the water, but this time it was not cruel. It was curious, almost hopeful. In the evenings, Ekenna often came to Amara's compound, sitting by her loom as she worked. He never interrupted, only watched with the quiet admiration of a man witnessing devotion. "You weave like the gods whisper patterns to you," he said once, his voice low and sincere. Amara smiled faintly. "Perhaps they do," she replied. "Or perhaps weaving is how I speak to them." Ekenna tilted his head. "And what do you say?" She paused, eyes on the golden threads sliding through her fingers. "I tell them to forgive me for doubting love." He reached across the loom and gently touched her wrist. "Love forgives before it's even asked to," he murmured. That night, Amara lay awake listening to the rain drumming softly on the roof. It was a sound she had always found comforting, predictable, rhythmic. But now it carried a new note, the heartbeat of possibility. She thought of Ekenna's words, of his steady gaze that saw not her wounds but her worth. Hope, once a stranger, began to return in cautious steps. Weeks folded into months. They worked together, trading wrappers for goods, laughter for comfort. Ekenna taught her how to read the language of marketplaces in faraway towns, how to tell a dishonest trader by the way his eyes darted when counting coins, or how to double the value of a wrapper simply by telling its story with passion. "Every cloth has a spirit," he said, "but only the storyteller gives it wings." Amara listened, and for the first time in years, she felt seen as more than the sum of her scars. One evening, the two sat by the riverbank as dusk painted the sky with fire and purple. Ekenna picked up a smooth stone, tossed it into the water, and watched it skip thrice before sinking. "You see," he said, "even stones know how to dance when they believe they can float." Amara laughed, a sound so pure and unexpected that birds startled from nearby trees. "And what do you believe?" she asked. He turned to her, his expression softening. "I believe I have found the reason the road led me to Oluwani." Her breath caught. She turned her face away, but not fast enough to hide the tear that slipped free. "Ekenna," she whispered, "I am not the woman a man dreams of marrying. I cannot give you what others can." He reached out and gently lifted her chin. "You can give me peace," he said. "And I have traveled far enough to know peace is rarer than beauty." It was then she realized that love, true love, was not an invasion. It was a quiet homecoming. It did not demand entry. It waited at the door until you opened it yourself. By the time the moon climbed high, their hearts had already promised what words dared not yet speak. And somewhere deep within the forest that cradled Oluwani, the spirits of the land stirred, whispering of a love pure enough to wake ancient magic from its sleep. The change in Amara did not go unnoticed. Her laughter, once guarded like treasure, now rang freely in the market square. Her shoulders, once bent beneath the weight of whispers, stood tall again. Even her weaving transformed, brighter colors, bolder patterns, wrappers that looked like captured sunlight. Women came from neighboring villages just to buy her cloth, claiming that Amara's designs brought luck to marriages and softened quarrels between lovers. The old midwife, Mama Chica, visited her stall one afternoon and nodded knowingly. "Your heart is healing," she said. "I see it in your hands. The gods bless what is honest." But not everyone celebrated her joy. The men who once mocked her now watched from afar, uneasy. "What spell has she cast on that traitor?" they grumbled. "A woman like her should be pitted, not adored." Some even tried to poison Ekenna's mind with sly comments. "Brother, you're a fine man. Why bind yourself to a woman who can't give you sons?" But Ekenna only smiled, shaking his head. "Perhaps you have never met a woman whose soul gives more than her body ever could." Their jealousy, however, could not pierce the quiet fortress of love Amara and Ekenna built. Together they expanded her business, Ekenna handling the trade routes, Amara creating designs so unique that buyers began to call them the songs of Oluwani. Soon her wrappers were seen in festivals far beyond their region, and the once ostracized weaver became a symbol of grace and resilience. One evening, as the two sat outside their home under a sky embroidered with stars, Ekenna turned to Amara and said, "Do you realize, my love, that the same mouths that once cursed you now bless you? The world changes its tune when it realizes truth can dance longer than rumor." Amara smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Perhaps the world never hated me," she said softly. "It only feared what it did not understand." Ekenna chuckled. Then we will teach it patience. Their peace grew roots. Neighbors began to seek their advice on matters of marriage and trade. Children brought them gifts of fruit. Women came to learn weaving. And for a time, Oluwani seemed to glow with the reflection of their joy. Yet even the most tranquil river carries undercurrents unseen. Deep within Amara's chest, a quiet sorrow still lingered, the ache of her body's silence. On nights when Ekenna slept peacefully beside her, she would stare at the moon and whisper, "Why me?" She loved him dearly, but the fear that one day he might crave what she could not give haunted her like a slow drumbeat. Ekenna sensed her restlessness. One morning, he found her at the riverside, washing her hands again and again in the cold water. "You are trying to rinse away what was never dirt," he said gently. She turned, tears glimmering. "I just wish I could be whole for you." He stepped closer, his voice steady. "You already are. You think your worth lies in what you cannot give, but my joy lies in everything you already are." His words should have been enough, yet love's deepest wounds rarely heal with reason. The following months tested them in ways neither foresaw. Ekenna's family, who had tolerated his choice from a distance, began to visit, uninvited, unkind. They whispered that Amara was a witch who had stolen his desire, that she had eaten her own unborn children to remain youthful. "No woman stays untouched this long unless she walks with spirits," said one aunt, her voice sharp as a pestle striking stone. Ekenna defended his wife fiercely. "If spirits made her, then may every man pray to such spirits," he declared, sending them away. But each insult left a small wound in Amara's heart. The village that had once mocked her now adored her, but the family of the man she loved most became the mirror of her old pain. Still, she endured. Love is not measured by ease, she told herself. It is tested in the fire of misunderstanding. She poured her pain into her weaving again, this time creating a new series of cloths she called the River's Heart, each one bearing patterns of swirling blue and gold. They sold faster than any before. Her hands did not tremble when she worked, they danced. One evening, when the air smelled of roasted yams and the moon rested heavy in the sky, Ekenna took her hand and said, "Let the world say what it will. I have found peace beside you. And peace, Amara, is worth every storm." But far beyond their compound, fate stirred again, this time in the form of a stranger with gray hair and weary eyes, walking toward Oluwani with secrets to share and a blessing that would change everything. 2 years passed. The rains came and went, washing away the dust but never the memories. Amara and Ekenna's love stood firm like a tree rooted by the river, bending with storms yet never breaking. Their laughter filled the compound. Their bond inspired songs sung by children in the evenings. To the outside world, they seemed untouchable, a picture of devotion unmarred by life's harshness. But within Amara's heart, shadows lingered. Every joy she felt was followed by a quiet question. What if one day he longs for what I cannot give? When she watched mothers carrying babies on their backs, a soft ache spread through her chest. When she saw the tender way fathers lifted their little ones, she smiled but turned away before her eyes betrayed her. Ekenna sensed her longing. He tried to fill their days with joy, trips to neighboring villages, gifts of beads, laughter under the moon. But he could not fill the silence that grew in her at night. "Tell me your thoughts," he urged one evening, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She hesitated, then said, "You give me everything, Ekenna. But the gods, they withheld one thing, and I fear it will one day be what drives you from me." He took her hands firmly. "The gods gave me you. I need nothing else." His reassurance warmed her, but the unease did not leave. And then came the cruel words of Ekenna's kin, like thorns in the flesh. They arrived one afternoon, his mother, 2 aunts, and a cousin, their wrappers bright, their faces darker than storm clouds. "We have come to speak the truth," the eldest aunt declared. "Our son wastes his strength on a barren woman. Have you not wondered, Ekenna, why your line remains unblessed? A man without children is a river that ends in dry sand." Ekenna rose slowly, anger burning beneath his calm. "Do not call my marriage a curse," he said, his tone trembling with restraint. "If you value peace, leave this house." The women gasped, insulted. His mother's eyes glistened with pride and pain. "My son," she said, "love blinds even wise men. But the day will come when you remember our words." They left, their whispers trailing like poisonous smoke. Amara, who had hidden behind the curtain, collapsed in tears. "I have brought shame upon your name," she wept. Ekenna knelt beside her. "You have brought me strength," he said. "Let them curse. Their bitterness cannot stain what the gods have blessed." Yet that night, when the moon was high, Amara lay awake long after Ekenna had fallen asleep. She turned toward him, studying the lines of his face. The man who had chosen her, defended her, loved her beyond reason. "What if love itself grows tired?" she whispered into the darkness. The silence gave no answer. In the weeks that followed, she withdrew into her weaving again, crafting wrappers of deep crimson and black, colors of courage and mourning. Her customers noticed the shift in tone but said nothing. They knew that artists often spoke their pain through color. Ekenna noticed too, but chose patience. Sometimes, he thought, a heart must journey through sorrow to return home to joy. Then one fateful day, as the sun climbed high and her tears had barely dried, a frail old woman appeared at her stall. Her wrapper faded, her eyes bright with wisdom. "My child," she said softly, "I have heard of your kindness and your pain." Amara straightened, surprised. "Who are you, Mama?" The old woman smiled. "A traveler who once knew the forest's secrets. I came to bless my granddaughter's marriage, but I have nothing to give. Will you let me buy the cheapest of your wrappers?" Amara's heart melted. She handed the woman one of her finest. "Take it, Mama," she said. "May it bring your granddaughter joy." The woman's eyes shimmered with gratitude. You give without asking, she said. Perhaps the gods sent me to you. Then her tone shifted, softer, deeper. I know your story, child. The wind carries such tales. But listen, beyond the hills of Oluwani lies the Forest of Ojiji, where stands the tree of truth. Its sap grants the deepest wish of those pure in heart. Few dare seek it. Most who do never return. Amara's breath quickened. And if one does return, she whispered. The woman smiled faintly. Then their truth becomes legend. As the old woman vanished into the crowd, Amara stood frozen, her heart a storm of fear and hope. That night, she told Ekenna everything. He frowned, thoughtful but skeptical. There are stories in every village, he said. How do we know this tree exists? I don't, she replied, her voice trembling. But what if it does? He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Then we shall find it together. And so began a journey that would test not only their love but their very souls. A journey into the forest where truth demands a price, and only hearts willing to lose everything can find what they truly seek. The night the old woman left, Amara could hardly sleep. Her mind replayed the sound of that raspy voice, soft yet commanding, mysterious yet strangely comforting. The tree of truth. The words echoed like a drumbeat inside her skull. She imagined it standing tall among silver mists, its branches heavy with ancient wisdom, its roots deep enough to remember every secret ever whispered to the earth. The thought refused to leave her. At dawn, the sky was a dull gray, heavy with the threat of rain. Amara sat outside her hut, staring at the mist curling above the hills beyond Oluwani. Her fingers fidgeted with the loose end of a golden thread. When Ekenna emerged from their room, she turned to him, her eyes bright with restless hope. Ekenna, she said quietly, I must find that tree. He frowned, rubbing sleep from his eyes. My love, you speak of a tale mothers tell to frighten children from wandering too far. You have found peace already. Why invite danger? Amara clasped her hands. Because peace is not enough if it hides pain underneath. I have spent years learning to live with my condition, but I dream every night of being whole. Not for vanity, not even for desire, but so that I might give you children, Ekenna. So that our love will not end with us. Ekenna sighed, lowering himself beside her. You think I measure love in bloodlines? The gods gave me you. That is enough. Amara's eyes shimmered with tears. Then let me do this, not just for me but for us. If there is even the smallest chance that the old woman spoke truth, I must try. Ekenna held her face in his palms. If you must go, he said finally, then we go together. That afternoon, Amara gathered food and wrappers into a small bundle, while Ekenna sharpened his machete and packed dried meat, rope, and water gourds. The villagers watched them in disbelief as they prepared. To the Forest of Ojiji, someone exclaimed. No one returns from that place. But Amara's resolve was unshakable. Just before sunset, Mama Chica appeared at their gate. Her wise old eyes searched Amara's face. You have chosen a hard road, my child, she said. The forest does not give its gifts freely. But your heart is pure, and purity can turn even a curse into light. Amara bowed. Bless me, Mama. The midwife placed her wrinkled hands on Amara's head and whispered a prayer in Igbo, one that spoke of courage, protection, and truth that does not break the soul when it arrives. Then she turned to Ekenna. Guard her not as a warrior guards treasure, but as a man guards his own breath. The forest feeds on fear. Do not let it dine on yours. They left at dawn. The road was narrow, winding between tall grasses and groves of whispering palms. The wind shifted often, as if trying to warn them back. They walked hand in hand, the sun casting long shadows that merged as one behind them. By nightfall, the hills had grown taller and the air colder. They built a small fire beside a stream, and as Amara drifted to sleep, she thought she saw faint lights flickering deep in the distance. Not stars, but eyes. Watching. Waiting. At sunrise, Ekenna touched her shoulder. It's time, he said. The forest lies just beyond. Before them stretched an expanse of darkness and green. The Forest of Ojiji did not welcome. It swallowed. The trees stood ancient and colossal, their roots like sleeping serpents, their canopies so thick that sunlight entered only in thin golden knives. The air smelled of moss, secrets, and things too old to name. Ekenna tightened his grip on Amara's hand. Whatever we find, we face it together. Amara nodded. Together, she echoed. And with that vow, they stepped into the mouth of legend. The moment they crossed the threshold of Ojiji, the air grew heavy. Even their breath felt watched. Shadows moved where no wind stirred, and the forest floor whispered as if echoing footsteps that were not theirs. Amara's heart raced, but she pressed on. Each step seemed to sink deeper into silence. The path twisted like a living thing. They passed trees whose trunks were etched with symbols older than memory, spirals, eyes, and open hands. Sometimes a bird would call from far above, but its cry ended abruptly, like sound devoured by unseen teeth. Stay close, Ekenna said, his voice low but steady. He carried his machete drawn, though he knew no blade could cut the unseen. Hours passed without measure. At last, they reached a clearing where golden butterflies floated thick as mist. They were mesmerizing. Their wings glowed faintly, and their motion formed patterns that pulsed like breathing. Amara took a cautious step forward. Instantly, the butterflies swarmed around her, circling so thickly she vanished from view. Ekenna shouted, Amara, and tried to reach her, but an invisible force pushed him back. From within the golden storm, Amara heard whispers. Hundreds of them, all carrying her name. Unworthy. Unhealed. Impure. Her knees buckled. No, she whispered. I have suffered, but I am not broken. The butterfly's light dimmed, as if her words offended them. Then she remembered Ekenna's voice, gentle, constant. You are not your wound. She straightened, lifted her face, and said firmly, I am whole in ways your wings will never know. A silence followed. Then, one by one, the butterflies drifted apart, forming a glowing path through the clearing. Ekenna ran to her side, his face pale. What happened? He asked. They tested my heart, she said softly. And my truth answered. They continued deeper. The forest grew colder, the light thinner. Strange laughter echoed between trees. Once, Amara thought she saw a figure darting behind them, a tall, dark shadow moving too fast for human eyes. She tightened her grip on Ekenna's arm, but he only whispered, Don't look back. By the time they reached the river cutting through the forest, dusk had begun to fall. They crossed on a fallen log slick with moss. Halfway across, something shifted in the water below, enormous, unseen. The log quivered. Hurry, Ekenna urged. Amara quickened her steps, but a hiss split the air, low, thunderous, ancient. From the water rose a serpent the size of a tree trunk, its scales glistening black and its eyes twin flames of red. Stay behind me, Ekenna shouted, raising his machete. The snake coiled and lunged. He swung, the blade slicing across its face, but it barely flinched. The creature struck again, its tail whipping through the air like lightning. Amara screamed as Ekenna stumbled. The serpent lunged once more, its fangs sinking into his shoulder. He cried out, collapsing onto the log. Ekenna, she screamed, rushing to him. The serpent hissed, but she snatched up the fallen machete and, driven by sheer terror, slashed at the creature's head with all her strength. The blade struck deep. The snake convulsed, its body thrashing in agony before crashing back into the dark water, vanishing beneath the waves. Amara knelt beside Ekenna. Blood seeped through his shirt, black and glistening with venom. His breathing came ragged. No, 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 she whispered. Without thinking, she pressed her lips to the wound, spitting out the poison that burned her tongue. She did it again and again until her lips were numb, her tears mixing with his blood. Stay with me, Ekenna, she pleaded. Please. His hand found hers, weak but warm. Keep going, he whispered. The tree find it. She shook her head. I won't leave you. You must, he gasped. Truth demands sacrifice. He slumped, eyes fluttering. Amara screamed into the dark. I will come back for you. You will not die here. Gathering her strength, she dragged him to the riverbank, laid him beneath the shelter of a rock, and kissed his forehead. Wait for me, she whispered. I will return. Then, guided only by the faint hum that pulsed through the forest air, Amara turned toward the heart of Ojiji, alone. The path to the heart of Ojiji was no longer a road, but a trail carved from despair. Amara moved through the darkness with trembling limbs, the forest closing around her like a living thing. Shadows whispered her name, each one in a different voice, some sweet, some cruel. The ground pulsed faintly beneath her feet, as though the forest itself were alive, watching. Each step was heavier than the last. At times she saw flickers of light ahead, faces, memories, illusions. In one vision, she saw herself holding a child, smiling as Ekenna stood beside her. The image was so beautiful it broke her heart. She reached for it, and it dissolved into mist, leaving only emptiness. Stop showing me what I cannot have, she cried into the darkness. The forest's whisper answered, Then why do you seek it? She fell to her knees, sobbing. Because love deserves to be complete, she whispered. The silence that followed was endless. Then, faintly, she heard the sound of flowing water. Rising, she followed it until she reached a clearing bathed in an otherworldly glow. There it was. The tree of truth stood alone in the meadow, tall, radiant, ancient beyond measure. Its bark shimmered silver, its leaves sparkled like stars, and at its roots flowed a stream of golden sap that glowed softly in the night. Amara approached with reverence, her heart pounding. Great tree, she said, her voice quivering. I seek your help. The branches rustled, and a deep, echoing voice filled the clearing. Not from the air, but from inside her very soul. Amara of Oluwani, you have faced doubt, fear, and loss. Now, tell me truly, what is it you seek? Her lips trembled. I came here to be healed, to be like other women, to end my suffering. But now, she paused, tears streaming freely. Now, I only wish for Ekenna to live. The ground trembled slightly, and the voice grew softer, almost sorrowful. You would trade your healing for another's breath? Yes, she said firmly. Because his life is worth more than my pain. A long silence followed. Then the tree spoke again, its voice resonating like thunder wrapped in kindness. So be it. Your heart is pure. Drink from my sap, and your wish shall be granted. But remember, truth heals only through sacrifice. Golden sap trickled down one of the roots, gathering in a small pool. Amara knelt and cupped it in her hands. The liquid was warm, luminous. She drank, closing her eyes. For a moment, it tasted like sunlight and tears. Then a wave of warmth spread through her, not of healing, but of release. The wind shifted. The tree's voice whispered one last time. Return to your love, for your truth has been spoken. When Amara opened her eyes, she was alone. The glow faded, the forest stilled. She turned and ran, faster than she ever had, her bare feet bleeding, her lungs burning. The path seemed to part before her, as if the forest itself bent in respect. When she reached the riverbank, Ekenna lay motionless. Panic seized her heart. She fell to her knees, shaking him. Ekenna, please. Then his chest rose, shallow but sure. His eyes fluttered open. Amara, he whispered. She sobbed, laughter and relief mingling. You're alive. He sat up slowly, touching his shoulder. The wound was gone, only smooth skin remained. What happened? Amara smiled through tears. The tree healed you. Ekenna looked at her, realization dawning. You wished for me, not yourself. She nodded. Some things are worth more than pain. He took her hand and kissed it. Then let us go home, my heart. Behind them, unseen, the tree of truth shimmered once, its light flickering gently before fading into the forest's eternal silence. Dawn broke over Ojiji like a soft confession, light unspooling through the leaves as though the forest itself had decided, for once, to be merciful. Amara and Ekenna sat beside the river where life had returned to him, their fingers knit together with the urgency of those who almost learned the taste of goodbye. Birds flashed through the high canopy, brief sparks of color in a cathedral of green, and the water gossiped over stones as if retelling, in hushed delight, the story of a love that had bargained with truth and won a life back from the jaws of venom. Let me carry you, Ekenna said, still testing the miracle of breath in his lungs and strength in his limbs, as if the forest might change its mind and ask for the gift back. Amara smiled, brushing a damp curl from his brow. You have already carried me farther than men with unbroken bodies, she murmured. But there is one more road. Her gaze lifted toward the deepening line of trees. If the tree of truth listened to my plea, perhaps it will also hear yours. We will go back, ask that it heal me too. Ekenna's breath paused, then resumed, slow and measured. His eyes, clear, grateful, newly fierce, searched her face. If I step into that clearing, I step there because you saved my life, he said. But hear me. Whether the tree answers or is silent, the answer between us does not change. They rose. The forest received them again, its silence less hostile now, as if some quiet treaty had been signed on night air. The path back to the meadow seemed shorter, the obstacles less sure of themselves. Once, a cool wind braided through the branches above them, shaking down a glittering rain of tiny seeds that glowed like amber before dimming to ordinary brown in Amara's palm. Even miracles turn humble when they reach the hand, she whispered. Ekenna squeezed her fingers. And hands are where miracles learn purpose, he answered. By midday they stepped once more into that otherworldly clearing. The tree of truth stood like a remembered promise, silver-barked, star-leaved, haloed by a hush so complete it felt like music waiting to be played. Ekenna knelt first, set his machete aside as one lays down pride, and bowed his head. Great tree, he said, voice steady but raw at the edges. I am the man whose life was returned last night by the sacrifice of the woman beside me. If there is any mercy left in the cup of this forest, let it be poured for her. Heal Amara. Open the road her body has refused. Let our love carry children, or, if that is not your will, release her from the ache that shadows joy. The tree's leaves trembled softly, as if tasting each word for truth. When it spoke, the voice rose from the ground, the trunk, the sky, everywhere at once. Ekenna, son of many roads. Amara, daughter of Oluwani. Hear the law that keeps the world from tearing. No one who has made a wish or benefited from another's wish may claim a second. Truth is a balance beam. To lean too far is to fall. The words settled like dew, cool, bright, unarguable. Ekenna bowed lower. Then take back my life, he whispered hoarsely. Let me pay the cost and place the healing where it was meant. Amara's hand flew to his shoulder. No, the forest seemed to hold its breath. She stood, chin lifted, and faced the silver trunk. I gave that wish freely, she said. Gifts are not debts to be collected with interest. If sacrifice is the grammar of truth, then let my sentence stand complete. Silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. Then the tree's voice gentled. Your sacrifice stands. And yet, hear this also, many roads make a life. The childless womb is not an empty house if wisdom sleeps there. The shut gate is not useless if it guards a garden where weary souls are fed. What you gave, Amara, returned something to the world larger than one body's healing. You taught love its own definition again. Ekenna's shoulders shook. Amara's eyes filled, but the tears were not of pleading now. They were the simple overflow of a heart seen and named. She bowed. Then we will go, she said softly. We will carry what is ours with honor. Before they turned, Ekenna spoke once more, not asking, but thanking. For the law that keeps the world from tearing, he said. For the line that keeps greed from calling itself love. A breeze lifted through the clearing, stroking their faces, and in that touch they felt blessing, no more, no less. The way out of Ojiji uncoiled like a released breath. Where dread had stood, green corridors opened. They crossed the Venom River on a new fallen branch. The old passage gone, the forest insisting that exits must be earned anew. At the place of the butterflies, only two drifted now, golden and curious, settling for a heartbeat on Amara's wrist before lifting again, like the brief kiss of absolution. By evening, the outer edge of the forest released them into ordinary sunlight. On the hill above Oluwani, the village lay like a beaded necklace left neatly on the earth. Smoke curled from cooking fires, goats puzzled the last of the grass, and children flung sound into the air like gleaming stones. It would have been easy to pretend nothing had tilted in the world, but everything had. The two stood for a long moment, hands laced, watching the familiar become newly precious. When they finally walked into the square, the first to see them was Mama Chica. She did not startle. She nodded, as midwives do when birth arrives on time. You went, she said simply. We went, Amara replied. And came back with the right thing, the old woman added, reading the answer in their faces. The tree's price is always exactly what we hope not to spend. Rumor, that old market merchant, approached the story and found no purchase. There was nothing to mock. There was only a woman whose eyes held starlight and a man whose shoulders had learned the weight of grace. The children kept near them, sensing the soft crackle of wonder around their steps. Even those who had laughed before fell silent, for silence is the village's first admission of respect. That night, under a moon too bright to be shy, Amara and Ekenna sat outside their compound. No drum beat, yet everything in the air felt rhythmic, the chorus of insects, the warm night wind, their twin breaths finding the same measure. The law is hard, Ekenna said at last. Amara nodded. And kind, she whispered. It keeps us from devouring all we love in the name of love. She took his hand. We go forward, not fixed, but chosen. The river chuckled in the distance as if it had overheard wisdom and approved. Morning braided itself through Oluwani, and life resumed its hand-to-mouth miracles. Mortars thudding, roosters misjudging time, laughter ricocheting between compounds like polished stones. Amara rose with the sun and tied her wrapper with a new deliberateness, as though claiming, with each knot, the life she now refused to apologize for. Ekenna stacked bundles near the door, their edges square, their stories waiting. In the small mirror hanging by a nail, Amara's eyes looked back calmer, deeper. The kind of eyes that have learned to read the weather inside themselves and not panic at every cloud. Word of their return moved through the village like warm palm wine. Neighbors came to greet them. Some brought yams, others shy apologies wrapped in proverbs. Mom and Kem set down a calabash of groundnuts and kissed Amara's cheek. Those who try to measure the river with a spoon always go thirsty, she said, which was her way of admitting she had once measured foolishly. Not everyone came with blessings. Ekenna's family arrived as a frowning constellation, his mother at the center, 2 aunts orbiting bristly, a cousin trailing curiosity like a kite. They did not sit. We heard you went to the forbidden place, one aunt said, spitting the word forbidden as if it tasted bad. What did you bring back? A child. A proof. The cousin's eyes flicked to Amara's belly in a glance quick and cruel. Ekenna's posture altered by a hair, enough for anyone who knew him to recognize steel laid beneath cloth. We brought back life, he said evenly. Mine, which she purchased with the only wish the world owed her. He stepped closer to his mother. If you come to bless us, sit. If you come to break what the gods repaired, carry your words home. The older woman's gaze shifted from her son to Amara. Something in her softened. Perhaps the way grief recognizes sacrifice when it sees it walking in another's skin. You went into the forest, she said at last, voice low. You returned with him. She lowered herself onto the wooden bench, which creaked as if relieved to be trusted. Tell me how. Amara did not embellish. She told the truth like water poured from high to low. The butterflies that accused and parted. The serpent that struck, the running, the silver bark, the wish spoken not for her own body, but for the breath in Ekenna's. When she finished, the courtyard held a silence that did not demand to be filled. Ekenna's mother stood, crossed the small distance, and took Amara's hands. I carried him in my belly, she said, the words stepping carefully. But you carried him out of death. I have fought you with fear. Forgive me. Her forehead touched Amara's in a gesture older than apology. Around them, the aunt's defenses wilted into cautious respect. The cousin, suddenly uncertain of where to put her eyes, found the ground fascinating. Reconciliation, like weaving, happens one patient pass at a time. No one expected a festival where there had been a feud. But the river running between the two families grew narrower, and soon enough a plank lay across it, and then a bridge, and then a habit of crossing that no longer felt like a decision. Meanwhile, Amara's loom found a new command. Her hands, guided by the calm behind her ribs, created a series she named returnings. Wrappers that braided indigo night with the fine white of dawn, patterns that suggested paths winding out of forests that once seemed endless. Buyers came from beyond the hill country, drawn by rumor of cloth woven with both pain and its remedy. Ekenna, fair as ever in price and story, sent the wrappers on journeys that made their house a crossroads for gratitude. With each sale, a little more dignity returned to those who had spent years borrowing pride from borrowed judgments. Children began to gather at their threshold, a tumble of elbows and questions. Amara taught them to tie warp to beam, to mix dyes that did not run when sweat or rain found them, to count a pattern not in numbers but in breaths. Weaving is not only what the hands do, she said. It is what the heart repeats until the world learns to listen. Ekenna taught the older ones how to read a buyer's eyes, how to pack goods for a road that might turn treacherous without warning, how to say no without making an enemy, yes without making a fool. Trade, he told them, is the art of keeping tomorrow friendly. Some evenings, couples came and sat under the mango tree where rumors used to grow. They asked what to do with scorn, with pressure, with the ache of mismatched expectations. Amara never prescribed, she described. Do not promise what would require you to lie to yourself, she would say. Do not measure your worth on a scale someone else brought to your house. Ekenna would add, if love demands you become smaller to fit, it is not love, it is fear wearing your lover's clothes. People left lighter, as if they had set down baskets they did not realize were strapped to their backs. The village, too, shifted. Where cruelty once learned its steps, a different dance began. Girls walked the market with shoulders that did not flinch at every whistle. Boys watched Ekenna refuse jokes that bruised women and learned a man could grow taller by bending toward gentleness. Mama Chica, satisfied, retired from midwifing babies and took up midwifing wisdom, telling anyone who'd listen that the hardest births are often the births of a new way to see. Near the river, an old woman in a faded wrapper, perhaps the same who had first pointed to Ojiji, appeared one late afternoon. She lingered at the edge of their compound until Amara noticed and approached with water. The woman took the calabash, drank, and smiled a smile like the cracking of dry earth at first rain. Some trees are magic, she said, but most miracles are people who remember to be brave. She slipped away before thanks could gather its words. Within a year, Ekenna built a long, airy shed beside their home. Beneath its roof, looms multiplied, some small enough for little hands, some large enough for a festival cloth. They hired widows and girls who had been told their stories were over. They paid fairly and kept accounts where every number could be seen. They named the workshop the Udo, River of Peace, and stitched that name into a small stripe along the edge of each wrapper. Buyers began to ask for the edge first. Sometimes at night, Amara lay awake and listened to the workshop's quiet. Wood settling, thread whispering against thread where a day's rhythm still vibrated. A sadness would come, muted and familiar, place its head beside hers like a dog that no longer asked to be fed, only to be known. She would place her hand on it. "You can stay," she would say. "Just do not grow larger than the joy that lives here." And it never did. One evening, as a lavender dusk gathered itself over Oluwani, Ekenna brought out a small calabash of palm wine and 2 cups. "To the gift given," he toasted. "And to the gift kept," Amara answered. They drank, and the night seemed to agree. Chapter 15, The Eternal Lesson. Years, like careful weavers, passed their shuttle through the warp of days, and Oluwani wore the cloth of their lives with an ease that made even strangers feel briefly like neighbors. The workshop the Udo hummed at dawn, paused at noon, laughed at dusk. The wrappers of returnings became heirlooms. Brides wrapped themselves in them and whispered prayers for courage spoken in the language of thread. Old quarrels that once strutted through the square now only shuffled through memory when someone lifted a story and shook out its dust. Amara and Ekenna grew into the kind of couple whose silence other people trusted. They did not hold court, they held space. Children swarmed their threshold, some the apprentice's siblings, some the village's small wanderers, a few with no houses to call their own. Those were the ones who learned first to sleep safely on mats rolled at the edge of the loom room, who learned to stir the dye vats with long sticks, who learned that certain pains can be washed, not out of the cloth, but out of the voice that speaks your name. "A house," Amara would say while braiding a little girl's hair, "is not the number of rooms. It is how easily a child learns where to put their fear when night comes." Their compound widened without the walls moving an inch. On the second harvest after Ojiji, the council named a new festival, Ojinenki Eziaku, the Gong of Truth. It would be rung when the yam mounds stood fat and the rains remembered restraint. The festival had no king. Instead, each household was asked to bring one story that required courage to tell. Stories of mistakes owned, kindness given without witness, sorrows that had taught tenderness instead of cruelty. On the first night, as the moon rose and drums got their bearings, Baba Nana, older, leaner, light-lodged like an ember in his eyes, stood and spoke first. "My daughter taught me that a parent's fear can be a small god that demands too many offerings," he said. "I stopped bringing mine sacrifices." The gong rang, heavy and bright. The sound went around the square, through the mango leaves, across the river where fish turned their silver bellies to listen. After him came a young man who admitted he had once joined the mockers and now apprenticed at the Udo to learn a craft that might repair what his mouth had broken. Then a widow who confessed she had stolen palm oil during a lean month and returned the oil with interest once the market remembered her stall. The gong told for each truth. With each toll, a slack got pulled tighter on the net that held the village together. When it seemed the night had told enough, Mama Chica, her step small, her smile large, rose with a calabash of water and sprinkled the crowd. "For the things we will never say aloud," she announced, "but will still choose to heal with our hands." The gong sounded one last time, not to judge, but to bless. Back at the compound, under a sky whose stars felt closer than distance should allow, Amara leaned into Ekenna. "Do you ever wish we had gone into the forest for ourselves?" she asked. Not a wound opening, just an old road briefly walked again. Ekenna considered. "The day you chose my life," he said, "I learned that the measure of love is not what it acquires, but what it will abandon without becoming smaller. If I could go back, I would only ask for one thing, to be the kind of man you would choose the same way again." His hand closed over hers. "And I would be that man even if no tree ever heard our names." She smiled and watched a moth flirt with the lamp flame and wisely choose the dark instead. "We do have children," she said after a while, the truth settling around them like a shawl, warm, undeniable. "Some sleep here. Some come in the morning with bare feet and big appetites. Some bring us problems they should be taking to their mothers. But the world is a sieve and many mothers fall through. We do not hold them forever. We hold them long enough for their legs to remember strength." "Then perhaps," Ekenna replied. "Our house did not need a cot so much as a longer bench." Seasons kept their promises. The Udo grew, sprouted a second shed, then a third, not because ambition demanded it, but because gratitude did. The edge stripe bearing the workshop's name became a quiet seal passed from waist to waist. Far travelers learned to ask for it, even if they could not pronounce it. "The cloth with the river," they'd say. "The one that makes my body feel like a story." As for Obinna, the village learned he had married in a neighboring town. His furniture remained handsome, his pride less so. He came once, years later, to commission a ceremonial cloth. He stood at the edge of Amara's stall, not quite stepping under the baobab's shade. His eyes had grown older in the way that happens when a man gathers many beautiful chairs and not enough good words. "Your work has become something," he said, tone stumbling between envy and tribute. Amara nodded, her generosity practiced and genuine. "So has yours," she answered, because a truth that heals does not always need to name a wound. She sold him the cloth at the price she would have given any man. He took it and went, and the ground remembered how to be ordinary where he had stood. On the fifth gong of truth, a little boy, one of the house's many temporary children, asked a question while chasing a bead across the courtyard. Mama Amara, he said, for that was what children called her now, whether born of her or not. Is the tree of truth still in the forest? She looked toward the line of distant hills, where evening stacked its purple plates. Yes, she said. But it doesn't only live there. She tapped his chest lightly. It also lives in here, where your yes and no learn to speak without fear. The boy blinked as if granted a secret, and ran off to tell a bird that had not asked. That night, Amara dreamed, not of forests or serpents, but of a silver trunk reflected in a river that was unmistakably the Udo's rinse-water channel. In the reflection, the tree leaned close, and its leaves sounded exactly like many looms working in concert. She woke smiling. Beside her, Ekenna slept on his side, one hand outflung as if offering. Dawn had not yet begun, but the world had clearly decided to begin anyway. A rooster rehearsed from far off. Someone 2 compounds away negotiated with a reluctant fire. She lay there, counting the breaths of the man she had chosen and the quiet click of a life that fit. When the first stripe of light finally softened the room, Amara rose and tied her wrapper. The one with the narrow white path through indigo she had woven on the worst day, years ago. She stepped outside into the cool and felt the day take her name gently, as a palm takes rain. Ekenna joined her, and together they walked to the workshop where apprentices already waited with the excited gravity of those who know they are contributing to something that will outlast them. Today, Amara told them, we will weave the edge of mercy, a small border you will barely notice when you wear it. It will remind you, when the cloth grows old and the pattern fades, that what kept it together was not only strength, but kindness. Threads were strung, rhythm began, color entered the world again through their hands. Years later, many years, the story of Amara and Ekenna traveled farther than cloth, louder than gongs, quieter than a secret kept not out of shame but out of reverence. Children learned to say their names with the same ease they said river and home. The Forest of Ojiji remained where it had always been, holding its laws like a careful pot that refuses to crack under heat. And in Oluwani, a weaver and a trader taught their village the lesson that outlives the faces who first spoke it. That love, when it is true, does not always fix what is broken. It blesses the brokenness until it becomes a door through which many can pass.